of the origin of sin. Where did sin come from? What does sin mean? So we're going to go all the way back, look at sin, break it down, understand it, and try to get a better grasp on what sin means to us and what sin is in general. So if you wouldn't mind standing, we're going to go to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. And I usually don't want to read a whole lot of verses while you're standing, but I am going to read a few today to kind of set the foundation and get us a good understanding. So we're going to start at verse 1 and read all the way down probably to verse 6 or 7. We'll see. So we're going to start at verse 1. The Bible says this: Now the serpent was more subtle than the beasts of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. So the serpent is asking her these questions. She's answering them. Okay, no harm there yet. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know in the day that ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Verse 7, And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. So today I'm going to talk to you about the origins of sin. The origins of sin. You may be seated. Thank you so much. I'm not going to harp on women. A lot of people, let's go straight. Well, the woman gave the man the fruit, and no. He could have said no at any point. So we're not going to do that today, even though I don't know why preachers have done that over the years. I mean, it's not the woman's fault. I mean, the man could have said stop at any point. So I want to go back a little bit further, though. This is how sin was introduced to man, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I want to let's go first to where did sin even come from? So let's go back even further to that. Let's go all the way back to Lucifer. So how did sin begin if Lucifer in heaven was perfect? So I want to understand that question first. If heaven was perfect, how did sin originate in Lucifer? Well, the truth is this: heaven was created perfect. That is a true statement. Heaven was perfect. But it was not created without freedom. That's the thing you must understand, freedom. God did not create robots. He did not create robots. He created beings that did have an ability to choose. They were free-thinking beings. Lucifer was created in a perfect design. His appearance, everything about him was perfect. But he had an ability to choose. The Bible describes him in Ezekiel 28:15. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day thou wast created. I'm not just telling you he was perfect. The Bible says he was perfect in his ways and in the way he was created. Till iniquity was found in thee. Ezekiel 28:15. So he was perfect in all of his ways until iniquity was found. So perfection was there, then iniquity was found. Notice the phrase, iniquity was found in thee. Found, that's a very key word. It wasn't placed there by God. It wasn't created in him. It was produced within him. That iniquity was produced within Lucifer. It was not placed there by God. This means that God created Lucifer good, but Lucifer had the capacity to choose otherwise. Because this complex of how sin entered heaven in the first place has got so many people confused. So we need to understand it. Heaven did not produce sin. Lucifer did. Now, how did he do that? The environment was perfect, but perfect environment does not override freedom of will. So the Bible shows us clearly what happened in Isaiah chapter 14. So Isaiah chapter 14, we're going to read verse 12, 13, and 14. And the Bible tells us what happened with Lucifer and how this sin came about. Isaiah chapter 14, starting in verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, the God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. This is Isaiah, paraphrasing what Lucifer said. through divine interpretation. Remember, we believe this whole Bible is divine inspiration of God. So that he's getting an insight into what happened. And you notice what Lucifer is saying here. I will ascend. I will exalt my throne. I will be like the Most High. Look at all that inward facing things that he's saying. This is critical because sin was not caused by a broken world, a sinful influence, or a corrupt system. It was simply caused by self-exaltation. Self. So what happened? Lucifer turned his focus from God's glory to his own glory. That's all it took for sin to be created. That's all it took was Lucifer saying, God's not going to get the glory now, I'm going to get the glory. I'm going to elevate myself and be as God. I'm going to be better than God. I'm going to elevate my throne. That's all it took. Now here's another question that so many people are confused by, rather. Why did God allow it? God being perfect in all of his ways, why did he allow this to be created in Lucifer? This is where it goes even deeper because you must understand that God allowed the possibility of rebellion, which was what Lucifer was doing, rebellion. God allowed that because love, true love, requires a choice. To have true love, you must have a choice. If Lucifer could not choose to rebel, then he could not truly choose to worship. Remember, they're not robots, just like we are not robots. So now let's look at sin and how it was introduced to man. We know how sin came about now. We can understand that it was through Lucifer's self-exaltation, pride. His pride was the reason this happened. Rebellion against God. He wanted to be elevated. Why did God allow it? Because it matters if you have the ability to choose or not. So there was a time before shame, before guilt, before fear, when humanity walked in perfect harmony with God. In the garden was perfect, harmonious relationship with God on earth. Perfect. There was no brokenness, no insecurity, no anxiety, no hiding. It was just as God intended. Imagine waking up every day with no internal struggles, no stresses, no pains, just waking up to an actual good morning when everything's perfect. There's no worrying about how I'm going to pay the bills. There's no battle going on in my mind. There's no war going on in my spirit. It's just waking up feeling great. No temptations pulling at me. And every thought I think is pure and every motive is clean and every relationship pure. Just imagine it. That was life before sin. That was what God had designed for mankind. Adam didn't wake up wondering who he was. He knew who he was. Eve didn't compare herself to anyone. She was complete in who she was. There were no filters, no mask, no pretending, but everything changed. In Genesis 2:25, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. So the Bible tells us this all the way back. We were at Genesis 3. It's talking about in Genesis 2. Why is it telling us this early? Because it wanted us to understand something. They were naked from the start. Not a problem, not an issue, nothing whatsoever. It was just normal. That's how God intended. That was their design. It was normal, right? No issue there. Not just physically naked. They were spiritually uncovered. They had nothing to hide. What do I need to hide? Everything's perfect here. Nothing to hide. Nothing. But then something entered that shattered everything around. Everything changed. Because if we don't understand what sin really is, then we'll fight the symptoms and not ever fix the source. We have to fix the source of sin. We need to understand where it came from, what it actually is. Because remember, they had been walking around naked in their whole entire existence. One bite of this fruit, and all of a sudden they thought being naked was a problem. It wasn't a problem. It was how God intended them to be. Everything changed. Because before sin, humanity lived in perfect alignment with God's will. Perfect alignment. The Garden of Eden was not just a place, it was a dimension of divine order. Order. There was no death, no decay, no dysfunction. You must understand that God never created mankind with the thought process that they would die. That Adam and Eve were not going to die. They were created to be in perfect harmony with God for forever. There was no distance between God and man, no separation. God didn't visit occasionally. He would walk with them, talk with them. In Genesis 3:8 says that the voice of the Lord walked in the garden in the cool of the day. Just that was a normal occurrence. It wasn't unusual. That was normal life for them. They didn't have to pray for God's presence. They literally lived in it, around it, by it, every day. They didn't have to pray to him to enter into his presence. He was just there. That was what perfect was for God. So that's what made even Eden so powerful, because everything was in perfect order. God had authority. Man submitted, and creation was obedient. Perfect order. There was no separations between God and his creations, just perfect order. No confusion about identity, purpose, direction. Adam didn't search for purpose every day, wondering, why am I created? Why am I here? He just lived in the perfect place that God intended him. And this is what we must understand. Sin didn't just ruin behavior, it disrupted that relationship. It created that separation. But before sin, man didn't even need salvation because nothing was broken. They didn't have to pray to God to say, save me. They were just perfect. There was no separation there yet. So the origin of sin, it was not in man. I want you to understand that. Sin did not start in man. This what, the tree, the fruit, the snake, that's what we interpret. That was when it was introduced to man. That was not when sin originated. Sin originated, of course, in the rebellion of Lucifer. It was rebellion against God's authority and order. Long before the garden, that fall from heaven was where it was created. We read it, O Lucifer, how you have fallen from heaven. He said, I will ascend. Man, it is pouring outside. I will exalt my throne. All these things looking inward. The root of sin there in creation. The creation of it. I will. If you ever want to separate yourself from God, start saying, I will do this. I will do this. I will make this decision. I will go this way. I. You start doing it by yourself, you're just going to keep walking away from God further and further and further. So this is where it all started, this spirit of self-exaltation. I will do it. I will do it. And then we get kind of down to his trickiness when he introduces it to man, because he's having this conversation with Eve, and we get a little glimpse of it, and Eve's saying, well, God said not to do this. We can't do this over here. And he said, yea, hath God said? He asked her a question. Hath God actually said that? Yeah, did he? Notice the strategy there. Sin begins by questioning God's word, God's intention, and God's authority with little subtle things. You're doing something for God. God's placed something on your life, and then all of a sudden temptation comes and say, did God actually say that? You know that God said that about you, and he said that over your life. But the enemy would be like, did he actually say that? I have zero doubts in my mind that Eve knew that God said this. There was no question. She was there. She heard it. She knew that God said, don't touch that. But one simple question, did he really say that? All of a sudden, she's willing to cave. Questioning God's authority. But first thing he does is he likes to hit us with questions. Did God say that? And he's going to question you in your life. This is how sin is going to originate. It's going to come from a place of very, very simplicity, just like this. Such a simple act. Just take a bite. Such a simple act. Look at the ripple effect of that one simple act. That's how sin starts in your life. And so he's going to ask this simple question to you and I. Did God really say that for your life? Did he really say you shouldn't do that? Or did he really say you should do that? That's how it starts. And then he does something right after that. He backs it up with a lie. He backs it up with a lie. Because this is what he said to her. Ye shall be as gods. They are not going to be as gods. The lie was, they were thinking, well, God is all powerful. I'm going to be like God. That was the lie. There was a tiny bit of truth in that. The truth was, now they will understand right from wrong, which at that time only God understood right from wrong. They had no idea what's wrong. Wrong didn't exist. Sin didn't exist. There was no wrong. It was just right, perfect. But now they have an understanding. So he tells them this lie. You're going to be like God. You're going to have this great understanding. And that's not what happened. Instead, they doomed themselves to a life of death by this simple trick. Did God really say that? And then a lie that backs it up. So they had this desire that the enemy kind of picked up on and said, Be your own authority. Don't submit to God. Be your own authority. Well, he knew how to get them to sin because he knew what got him to sin. He knew for me it was getting elevated. So now, if that worked on me, I bet it can work on these humans as well. Let me talk to this Eve. Hey, you can be like God. That's just what he tried to do, is be like God, be greater than God. And look where he got him, kicked out of heaven. He tells her the same thing. You can be like God. She falls for the same thing, looking inward. So sin is much more than just a simple act. Sin is something that roots in you and keeps growing and growing and growing. Because we like to think of sin and, we have like our own understandings of sin. For some we'll say that, it's lying. For some we'll say it's lust, or for some we'll say it's, I don't know, the people drunk on the side of the road. We have different understandings of sin. But those are just symptoms. Those are symptoms of a greater problem, which is sin. They're symptoms. They're things we can fix, but we cannot fix the true problem unless we get to a person's life and get them introduced to God. There's only one thing that can remove sin, and it's not you, it's not me. It is a literal interaction with God. Because sin at its core is a rejection of God's authority in favor of our own self. That's sin at the very core. Rejection of what God has said and what he has put over my life for what I want to do. That's how sin has started. All the way back from the beginning, that was the root of it. It's never changed. Point at any sin, it doesn't matter. Tell me any sin, and I'll come back to the same conclusion. They did not follow God's authority over their life. Because if we're following this, we have no sin. Now, we're all imperfect because we're born into this sinful nature, right? So we're all born in this sinful nature. But if we follow this, we crucify that sinful nature daily. We defeat it daily. And when we don't submit ourselves to this authority, sin takes hold. The origins of sin tell us the exact format. Reject God's authority, listen to your own self, that's how you fall into sin. It doesn't matter what the symptom of the sin is, it all starts at the same place. Reject God's authority. Reject it. We can look back at Eve's decision and kind of see this anatomy played out in front of us. So Genesis 3:6. She said, or the enemy said, it's good for food. That's a lust of the flesh. He said it's pleasant to the eyes. That's lust of the eyes. Desired to make wise. That's the pride of life. It's not random. It follows a pattern. Sin is appealing to desire, distorts truth, elevates self. Every single time. So when sin broke, everything collapsed. The moment they sinned, everything changed in your life and my life. Relationship with God was immediately broken because of sin. You must understand, God desires nothing more to be in relationship with you. Nothing more. That's all he wants for you. But from the moment you're born, you're separated. Immediately because of sin. And when they understood, when that sin entered that moment, what did they do? They hid. Remember, we just talked about how they were naked before, and that was not a problem whatsoever because that in and of itself was pure. But the very second sin is introduced, they hide. They separate themselves from God and hide because they're ashamed of their nakedness. The same presence they once loved and had no problems being around, all of a sudden now they feared because they were ashamed of what they looked like. That's the effect of sin. Immediately, shame came upon them. Their identity was fractured. They realized they were naked and shame entered them. And authority was now reversed. Instead of ruling creation, they became slaves to sin. They didn't walk with the same stature they had. Now they walked with this weight upon them. They had no idea what they were feeling. And then because of that, death entered the world. They were warned of this. In Genesis 2:17, in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. They had no idea what they were being told. They thought because they ate it and they didn't die immediately that everything was, well, maybe he didn't mean that. No. They literally introduced death to mankind because the Bible tells us the wages of sin is death. There's no way around it. Death comes from us all because of our nature. Sin doesn't just make you bad, it separates you from God. When you look at people that are just drowning in sin, the worst part is that they're separated from God. Separated. And why does all this still matter today? Because the same nature of sin is still at work today. The tricks have not changed. He's using the same method. He'll whisper things like, you don't need God. You don't need him. You can do it your own way. You can do it better. You actually know better for your life. It's your life. You can do it by yourself. The tricks of the enemy have not changed whatsoever because his method has been tried and proven time after time after time again. And we see the results of those methods still working today. We see broken homes and confused identities and anxiety and emptiness and a world trying to fix itself without God. Because they've been lied to and told that they can do everything on their own. You have everything you need. Empower yourself. Do it on your own. They've been lied to over and over and over and over. Every struggle traces back to a root. They've been separated from God, disconnected from God. But hear me, God never intended to leave man in that fallen state. From the moment of the fall, God began a plan for redemption. From that very moment. What Adam lost in the garden, Jesus came to restore for us. Where sin said, do your will, he said, not my will, but thine be done. You understand that he came and changed everything. The cross wasn't just about forgiveness, although that was a huge part. It was about restoring relationship with his people, bringing back a closeness that sin had driven between him and his people. So today, the call is simple. We got to stop trying to be our own God. We don't understand that that's what we're doing, but if we're not submitting to this authority, we're submitting to our own authority. So we're saying that we know better than God. We've got to stop trying to run our own life and stop believing a lie that we know better than. We've got to come back to a place of surrender. You have to understand, sin began with rebellion. It began with rebellion. But restoration begins with surrender. If you want to be restored, it's so easy. We got to start first with surrender. It's so simple. Because the tricks have not changed. The same God that was walking in Eden in perfection is in this place today. He's in this place. We don't even understand because we don't feel the presence the same way, but he's here. He's here. And the only thing that separates us is our own self. We got to get ourselves out of the way. We have got to get ourselves out of the way so that God can have his way in our life. So he can have his way. That's the origin of sin. It's not something complex. It's not something really, really hard to understand. It's one being, Lucifer, looking inward and saying, I'm going to exalt myself and forget what God set in motion. And when you look at your life, are you doing something similar to Lucifer? I wonder if I'm creating problems in my own life because I'm just not listening to the voice of God. I'm just not submitting to the voice of God. Lucifer literally created everything that has happened to him and will happen for the rest of eternity because he simply would not obey the authority of God over his life. Think about the eternity that he will burn in. Everything he's done just because of one simple notion. I've got to elevate myself. I got to be elevated on the throne. That simple thought, everything he suffered because of that. Never what God's intended for him. And oftentimes we look at our own lives and we'll say, the enemy is fighting us. The enemy's put all these bad things in my life. I've told you before, we give so much credit to the enemy when he doesn't deserve it. How much have we created in our own life because we simply will not obey the authority of God? How much have I gone through in my own life because I just tuned his voice out and said, I know what I'm doing? How much mess have I subjected myself to because I said, I'm better. I know what to do. It's my life. I'm going to do what I want to do because I've tuned out his voice. The origins of sin are not complex. It's just thinking you know better, elevating yourself, not being surrendered to this word. Sin is not the symptoms. It's a deeper issue than that. It's rebellion against God's authority. So today, if you want to correct those things, let's not start with the symptom. Let's start with the source first. What's going on in here that's manifesting itself with these symptoms? What's going on in here first? I got to get this in check. I got to get this surrendered to God. Because sometimes if we have issues going on the outside, we try to fix those issues, but you're just putting a Band-Aid on a wound. You're not actually fixing the wound. And so if I have issues where, let's just say I have issues where I'm angry all the time. Well, for me, if I'm going to fix that, If I want to truly fix that, I got to start in here. This is where I got to start. I can't just say, well, I'm going to hold my breath and count to 10. That'll be one way. That's fixing the symptom, which sometimes you got to do that, I understand. But if I want to fix the issue is in here with me. What do I have to do to fix this issue? Well, I've got to get my heart right because I'm not submitted to the authority. So what is going on in your life today that you need to surrender to God? What symptoms are in your life because you have a heart that is not fully surrendered? What issues have we created because we're not fully surrendered? I wonder if you'd stand. Sin is not adapted over the years. It hasn't mutated and grown to this beast that we can't understand and comprehend. It's literally the same thing as all the way back from Lucifer. It's not changed. It's an inward thing. It's an inward thing. Where's your heart at? If your heart's in the right place, your life is going to follow. We've got to be surrendered today. I wonder if you could lift your hands and we could spend a moment in prayer.